John Hurley was on his way home from Seattle after completing a successful deal that would greatly increase the software company's cash flow. He worked for someone. In addition, he was able to see his younger sister, Lisa, who had traveled up from Tacoma to attend the University of Washington. They had a nice supper at the Hilton Garden and spent a few hours catching up. It had been a few years since he had seen her, and he had enjoyed their time together. He was looking forward to meeting Dana, his wife of almost 5 years. He despised being separated from her, but it was unavoidable due to his profession. He was looking forward to their 5-year wedding anniversary, which was on Friday, the day after tomorrow. Unbeknownst to her, he had already booked a weekend stay at a local resort hotel and ordered a blue sapphire sunburst necklace to give her there. His goal was to pick it up at the jewelry store the following afternoon. Right now, he was wondering where she may be. He contacted her cell phone before boarding the plane, but it went directly to voicemail. He also tried contacting the residence, but it went to voicemail. Perhaps she's out shopping with a pal. He thought of Donna and how much she missed her, who stood just under 5.5 feet tall. She had long, wavy, dark hair, hazel eyes, and a dark complexion that resembled a constant suntan. She was an excellent lover who kept her beauty to herself just the way he loved it. He just had one complaint: her extreme jealousy. She was not just one of the kindest women he'd ever met, but he despised it when she made false allegations. He loved her too much to ever cheat on her, and he went out of his way to make sure she knew. It had become so bad that he couldn't even have a work meeting with a female colleague without meals, because he suspected they were having an affair. He thought he'd finally stopped it when he challenged her to hire a private investigator, and having watched. Maybe he assumed that once she received confirmation of his fidelity, she would back down and realize her suspicions were unwarranted. He was fed up with her jealousy and false allegations. It's not like he didn't keep secrets from her. He did, and her continual harping on his alleged adultery threatened to expose one of those secrets in a very terrible way. He felt his heart rate rise as he recalled her frequent harping on the matter. He took a few deep breaths as instructed, but to no avail. He felt his face begin to burn and realized he needed to bring himself under control soon. He reached into his pocket and took out a little package of pills. He took one and started to relax after a few minutes. His heartbeat returned to normal. The man seated next to him expressed worry. "Are you okay, sir?" a man inquired. "Do you want me to call someone?" John shakes his head. "No, but thanks for asking," he replied. "It's simply an old cardiac condition. I have medication for it." The man nodded and sat back, keeping an eye on John just in case. Eventually, the plane landed. John grabbed his luggage and walked to his car, which was parked in the short-term lot. He tried calling Dawn again, but received no voicemail. He received the same reaction when he called the house. Where in the hell was she? He questioned himself. He started his car and drove home. When he finally drove into his garage, he saw his automobile was gone. He figured she wouldn't be home because it was around 6:30 p.m. Normally, she got home from work at 5:30. Perhaps she had chosen to go out with some of her workmates for a drink. He didn't think it happened very frequently, and he never minded her taking some time to unwind. But she would usually phone or text him ahead of time to let him know. She also knew he was going to come home today. When he returned from a trip, she was usually at home, allowing them to reunite. He gathered his belongings and trudged into the darkened house. He put his stuff away and went downstairs to see whether Donna had left a note. He found nothing and brewed himself a cup of coffee. This was peculiar, he thought. She always let him know when she would be gone for a while, so why wasn't there a note? Hugh considered this while sitting on his coffee. Suddenly his phone rang. He realized it was from Donna, so he responded. "Donna?" he asked. "Where are you now?" "I apologize, John," she said. "I was getting ready for tonight and had no idea you had called until just a few minutes ago." "Were you preparing for?" John asked. She expressed amazement. "Several buddies. And I wanted to surprise you when you get home tonight. Why don't you come over and we can celebrate?" "Sure," John answered. "Where are you now?" She handed him an address, which he jotted down. "What is this, anyway?" John asked. "Is it a nightclub, restaurant, or something? An old buddy of mine has a secret club at his house, and we decided to put something together for you," she explained. "It's kind of like a mix. Welcome home and anniversary party." "That sounds like fun," John responded. Dawn laughed at this. "Yes, I promise it will be a lot of fun," she said. Wear something casual. Okay, John explained. I will see you shortly. She said, see you, Pete, before hanging up the phone. Strange. He assumed she hadn't told him she loved him, but this was meant to be a surprise anniversary party of some kind. However, something about the way she spoke made him question what was going on. He walked upstairs, showered, shaved, and changed into blue trousers and a polo shirt. He checked up the address and discovered that it was in a rather rough part of town. Who did she know that lives out there? He wondered. He knew the most of the folks at the insurance agency where she worked and didn't believe any of them lived out there. So, who was this friend? He knew she used to run with a tough gang of people when she was younger, but he assumed she had outgrown them. He looked up, got in his car, and entered the address. He backed out, followed the GPS device to the address, and was surprised when he arrived. A medium-sized house sat in the center of the land. That was enclosed by a chain-link fence. He spotted the pickups and motorcycles parked around the area and became anxious because he didn't know any of the vehicles. He pulled in, parked, and approached the front door. When he knocked, a huge man in a t-shirt and trousers opened the door. John noticed a drink in his palm and heard rock music coming from within here. A man inquired. I'm John Hurley, and my wife Donna has asked me to meet her here, John explained. I hope I have the correct address. He smiled. But John wasn't persuaded it was because of true friendship. The man reached up and shook John's hand. He said, You must be Donnelly's old man. You can call me T-Bone. We had been awaiting you. Come in. John stepped in and noticed several enormous males in the front room. Hello, everyone, T-Bone announced. The man of the hour has arrived. The other man nodded and smiled at John. They may have been smiling, but John did not feel any genuine friendliness here. Where is Donna? John asked. She's downstairs getting ready for the main event, T-Bone added, causing the others to laugh. Want a beer? Yes. Yeah, John replied. One of the others gave John a bottle of cool beer. Thanks, John stated. He opened it and took a cautious sip. So what's the major event? He asked T-Bone. That's the surprise, T-Bone explained. Your elderly lady wanted to do something special for your anniversary and requested us to assist her. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, John explained. Who are you guys? T-Bone pointed to one of the males in the room, saying, That over there, CJ. Archie is over there with the person standing next to him. He added that big fella back there. We call them both. I am sure you understand why. John noticed a very large, muscular black man standing near the kitchen table. All of them appeared to be mean snakes, and John noticed the huge knife strapped in a scabbard on Archie's hip. Here, John said, and you're all his friends. You mentioned that you've been there for a time. I haven't seen her much since she married you, and she's never mentioned any of you to me before, John replied. I'm not surprised, T-Bone replied. Most individuals strive to avoid us as much as possible. Do you have a private club here? John asked. Yes, T-Bone said, down in the basement. We built it ourselves. We enjoy getting together from time to time, having a few drinks and bringing in some entertainment. The others giggled, but John's hackles were rising. Something horrible was going to happen, but he had no idea what John had heard. Footsteps emerged from the basement. She's really a six-man, he said as he entered the front room. Is this her older man? Yes, T-Bone said. John, this is Chick. He will lead you down. What will happen? John asked. T-Bone expressed amazement. I guarantee it will be an evening you will never forget. The other people laughed, but John was frightened. It'll be fine, Jack said. Come on, Dawn is waiting for you. John approached Jake, who took him below. T-Bone said, Happy anniversary, as John began his descent. When he arrived downstairs, he noticed a tiny bar in one corner of the basement and a well-lit raised platform at one end of the room. The curtain draped across the end of the area, which you realized was most likely a stage. He was particularly concerned about the bed in the center of the stage and the camera positioned on a tripod a few feet behind. The walls were covered in neon beer signs, and the space was dimly lit, reminiscent of a pub. A pool table was placed at the opposite end of the basement, and John noticed more tables in the room. A jukebox took up one section of the wall, and John recognized it was the source of the music. Two of the men stood in the room watching John arrive. Jake took him to a chair at the front of the stage. The chair sat adjacent to the table, but it faced the stage. "Take a seat," Jake replied, pointing to the chair. "Where is Dana?" John asked. "She'll be out soon," Jake replied. "Go on, sit down. You can place your beer on the table if you wish." John laid his beer down and looked around. Something inside told John that he needed to get out of here, but he believed the 5 men upstairs would not let him escape. Plus, he was concerned about Dana. What would happen to her if he left? He took one more sip and set his bottle on the table. When he sat in the chair, Jake and the other 2 men seized his arms and ordered, "Tie them to the arms." "What the fuck is happening?" John inquired, his voice rising. The men ignored him and lowered his ankles to the legs of the chair. "Get me out of here. Right. Ducking now?" John demanded. "Shut up, jackass." He heard what his wife said. He looked up and saw Donna wearing nothing but a little thong and a half bra, possibly exposing her knee. "What the fuck is this?" John demanded. "Why are you dressed that way? Who are these guys?" "This is to commemorate our anniversary," she spit. "These are my friends, and they'll help me teach you a lesson about cheating." She threw a picture in his lap, and he looked. Someone had taken a snapshot of him enjoying dinner with his sister. "I've never cheated on you," John explained. "You've got this completely incorrect." "Bullshit!" she yelled. Suddenly, John recognized Stars as one of the men who had bound him on the chair. "Strike him in the face." John shook his head, then closed his eyes. "Stop it," Anna instructed the man, who backed off. "I'll be the one to teach him his lesson." She turned back to her spouse. "Donna, please stop this right now so that we can address it," John said. "It isn't as it seems." "Really?" she asked. "You seem to be enjoying yourself with that blonde floozy. So if you can enjoy yourselves, I can too. But unlike you, I will not keep it a secret." With that, she turned away and walked on stage. "Okay, boys," she announced. "It's showtime." John attempted to object, but one of the men inserted a bulk act into his mouth, blocking him from seeing anything. He attempted to fight the man, but was unsuccessful. By this point, everyone else had gone downstairs. T-Bone stood next to him, whispering into his ear. "Nothing personal," he stated. "But Dawn is an old friend, so we agreed to help her give you a lesson. Now sit down and watch the performance. Don't try to be here. When she is finished, we will let you leave. Maybe she'll join you, but it's up to her." John attempted to speak something, but the gag in his mouth stopped him. "Just relax," T-Bone urged. "Take your meds like a man." He sat up again and gestured at CJ, who was standing near the jukebox. CJ. He pressed the button, and his song began to play as the music began. Dawn began dancing and twirling around like a scooper. She took off her shoes and carefully removed her bra, massaging her tits. "Do you enjoy this, lover boy?" She gazed at John. "Did your little blonde slut handle this for you?" She danced a little more and then began working her thong down her legs. John could see she had shaved her kitty bald, and she was damp between her legs. Donald, after she threw a small thong at John. "I sincerely hope you like this, lover boy, because you will never touch my cat again," she said. "Come on, boys, show little Johnny how a genuine man ducks a woman." She left all of the men except Georgie. As John watched her clothes being pulled off, Donna knelt down. She alternated sucking and stroking their cocks. John shook his head and attempted to shout "no" through the gag. He observed Archie standing near John's chair, arms crossed across his chest. He was clearly there to keep John under control. Donna stepped up and led the men to the bed on stage. She sat on the bed looking at John. "This will teach you to cheat on me, you bastard," she hissed. She lay down on the bed, and 2 of the men stood by her head with T-Bone positioned between her knees. He briefly returned his gaze to John. "Nothing personal," he stated. "But John is the best stock I've ever had." He laughed and returned his attention to her. "Get ready, baby." John was forced to watch as the men took turns with his wife. This, however, did not turn him on. Exactly the contrary. He attempted to contain himself with the breathing exercises he had learned during his martial arts training, but wrath began to rise within him. John felt sick to his stomach. Donna was correct about one thing. He would not touch her again. When he watched Donna get up on her knees, he assumed the degradation was over, but he was mistaken. She looked at him, chuckled, and left him to worry. "Honey," she remarked sarcastically, "aren't we just warming up, boys?" The men chuckled at this. John looked up at Archie, who was smiling while watching the show. John questioned why he wasn't engaging in the band. Or Julia Janet, who discovered and held John's head in his hands. "Watch them, not me," he hissed, forcing John to gaze toward the stage. John could feel his wrath growing as Donna stuffed them into all of her openings. Even Bo. Donna said, "I bet you blonde pleating can do this." "Just so you know, I'll probably get pregnant tonight," she remarked with a chuckle. "I am sure you observed that no one used a condom, and I've been off my meds for a few weeks. Don't worry, I use the diaphragm anytime you approach me, so you don't have to be concerned about it being yours. But you will raise this child as your own." John shakes his head. His rage obscured his view. "You are undoubtedly asking why RJ haven't touched me, have you?" she asked. John nodded his head. "You see, Archie is gay. He prefers males over girls. And after tonight, you will too." They all chuckled as John felt his face becoming red hot. He turned to look at Archie and spotted his unfastened jeans. He pulled out his high clock and began approaching John. Jay said, "I'm going to take this gag off of you, and you'll learn to cook. Do it correctly, and I will kill you." Archie removed the bull gag from John's mouth and pointed his clock at him. "That is it. Open up and take it. I guarantee you'll adore it." For the second time in his life, John snapped. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the midst of a heap of moaning bodies on the ground. RJ was screaming in agony, his left hand pinned to the table by a knife plunged to its hilt. He felt pain in his arms and legs and noticed blood trickling from the zip ties that held him to the chair. Looking up, he noticed John wide-eyed and shaking. "Please do not hurt me," she begged. "I'm not going to hurt you," John murmured, shaking his head and keeping his gaze on her. John retrieved his phone from his jeans pocket and dialed 911. After he finished, he put his phone away and glanced at her. "You dumb count," he grabbed John. She remarked, "I got you dead to rights. You cheated on me with that blonde slut. I was simply getting even with you. So you have to pay to follow me in Seattle, is that correct?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "And I got the photograph. Did you actually read the report that came with it?" John asked. She shakes her head. "No," she replied uncomfortably. "All I did was glance at the photograph. That was my sister." "You are an uneducated count," John yelled. "We last saw her during our wedding. She is a senior at the University of Washington. She came to visit me in Seattle and we had supper. That is all. Just dinner. So you saw the photo but did not question me about it. You just made an assumption, as you always do. So guess what? You foolish count, you're correct about one thing. I'll never touch you again. I will see you in jail, and then I'll divorce you. Cookie, inquire. We finished. No, John, please do not do it." She returned to working toward him. "Stay away from me," John stated. "John, please," she implored. "I made an error, that is all." "Yes, you made a mistake." "All right," John replied, "and you'll pay dearly for your blunder." By then, the police had come, and 6 cops had broken down the front door. They all had their weapons pulled and glanced around at the carnage. They immediately walked through the basement, inspecting each man. One officer yanked the knife from Archie's grasp and watched him drop to the floor. The sergeant approached John. "Did you finish all of this?" he inquired, shaking. John nodded his head. "Why?" the sergeant asked. "Look at the video and you'll understand why," John remarked, pointing to the camera. "Check out the video," the sergeant instructed one of the officers. The officer looked at the footage briefly before motioning for the sergeant. After briefly scanning the footage, the sergeant returned to John. He answered, "Look, it appears that you are acting in self-defense. But I'll need a complete statement and you need to be checked out by then." Ambulances arrived and paramedics started transporting the men upstairs on gurneys. A plainclothes investigator entered the room and began speaking with the police. After reviewing the video, he approached Sergeant and John. "I'm Detective Jones." "You must be Mr. Hurley," the detective stated. "Yes, that's me," John said. The detective stated that he had taken a cursory look at the footage. "I agree with Sergeant Smith on this point. It appears you acted in self-defense. Tell me what occurred." John recalled the events of the previous several hours. The detective took notes while John spoke. "How did you break out of the chair?" Jones inquired. "And how did you take down all these men? They all appeared to be significantly larger than you." "I have a medical condition," John explained. "I have had it since I was a child. It has a name, but I have no idea how to pronounce it. The simple line is that under certain settings, my adrenaline levels skyrocket, and I basically lose control, for lack of a better description. I have a medicine that helps me keep it under control, and my martial arts training helps me stay calm. This is only the second time in my life that something like this has occurred. Do you have the medication with you? Jones inquired. John nodded his head. I have it with me at all times, he explained. I just take it when necessary, which isn't very frequently. Jones requested one of the other officers to bring a bottle of water, which he did. Perhaps you should get one now, Jones explained, handing John the water. John took the little package from his pocket and gulped the tablet with the water Jones had given him a few seconds later. John felt significantly better. Are you all right now? Jones inquired. Yes, thanks, Jones replied. Do you recall what you did here? Jones inquired. No, I don't, John replied, shaking his head. Jones shows John the footage. He was astonished by what he saw. It was like seeing a Steven Seagal film, only this was actual life. He pictured himself doing more than just getting out of the chair. In the video, he pulled Arg's knife from his sheath and thrust it into the larger man's left hand, pinning it to the table. The other men followed him. His dog sat afraid. In less than a minute, John had defeated all of the other men. You can't recall doing any of this? Jones inquired. No, I don't, John replied. Honestly, I never thought I'd be able to make something like this using the last thing you remember. Jones asked the man about to place his dick in my mouth, John remarked. You're claiming he was going to force you to surrender your head? Jones inquired. John nodded, tears flowing down his cheeks. Yes, he replied calmly. He was planning to greet me and my wife was in on it. I see, Jones remarked, peering across the room as another cop taking his statement. The police had already covered her cum-coated body with a blanket. Mr. Hurley, I want you to go to the hospital and get checked out. I'll speak with you again after I've collected all of the evidence. I assume you intend to press charges? Absolutely, Jones replied. How about your wife? Jones inquired. Do you want to bring accusations against her as well? Jones answered. Especially against her. She is the driving force behind all of this. Very well, Jones replied. He grabbed John's contact information as a paramedic and examined his first ankle. I'll be in touch, Mr. Hurley. I would appreciate it if you did not leave town. Jones said, I'm not going anywhere. Detective Jones nodded and issued directions to the officers before going to meet Donna, who was still being questioned by an officer. A few minutes later, John wheeled her out of the room after she was shackled and released. Please, John, she begged, let them take me away. Please explain that it was all a big misunderstanding. John shook his head the other way. After everyone had finished asking, John drove to the hospital for a checkup. A few hours later, he drove home with his cuts cleansed, treated, and bandaged. On the way, he remembered he hadn't eaten since leaving Seattle, and so stopped at a drive-thru for a burger once. So he called his employer, Jim Rollins, and explained the issue. Damn, John. I am sorry to hear that, Jim remarked. Look, why don't you bring the same contract and take the next week off? You have plenty of vacation time coming up. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. John spoke when he had cooled down. John showered and went to bed the next day. He went to the jewelry shop and canceled John's order. His necklace. He ended up paying a tiny restocking fee but received the majority of his money back. He also canceled his hotel reservation and had the charges returned. He then called around and scheduled an appointment with Jenny Hawkins, an attorney at law, for a divorce on Friday. He had barely finished eating lunch when his phone rang. He glanced and saw that it was finished. His parents. He took a big breath and responded, Hello? He asked, What the hell is going on, John? Marcia's mother-in-law, Donna, called from the county jail. She says she was detained and is being held without bail. Have you done anything? John couldn't believe this woman had so much nerve. He counted to 10 and took many deep breaths before responding. Did she explain why she got arrested? John asked. Marcia stated it was all a misunderstanding on your behalf. Really? John asked. You mean she didn't tell you about her plan to tie me up, force me to watch her have sex with many men, and then have me gripped by one of her gay friends? Didn't she tell you about it? What? Marcia asked. Why would she do that? Because she saw a picture of me eating dinner with my younger sister and assumed I was having an affair, John explained. The woman is crazy. And tomorrow I'll meet with an attorney to file for divorce. You can't be serious, Marcia replied. Look, I know you're upset, but you can understand how she feels. What if you saw a photo of her eating lunch with a man? I'd ask her about it, John replied. I wouldn't fly off the handle like she did. Look, Marcia, you have no idea what your daughter did, and there is no way in hell I can ignore it. I've been dealing with her extreme jealousy since our wedding. I am tired of it. It comes to an end now. He then ended the call. When she called back, he immediately sent the call to voicemail. Curious. He entered the second bedroom where he and Donna had their home computers set up. He sat down at the computer and fired. A few people already knew her passwords, so he was able to easily access her desktop. He opened her email client and was shocked by what he saw. He found an email from something called Jenkins Investigations and opened it up. Attached to the email was a document and a photo. The photo was of him and his sister eating dinner, the same one she tossed in his face earlier. The report stated that target John Hurley, meaning him, had eaten dinner with what appeared to be a much younger woman. The report went on to say that after dinner, the woman left the hotel and Hurley went to his room. There was more. The report clearly stated that the woman was Lisa Hurley, a senior attending the University of Washington, and according to public records, was John seeing his sister. At no time was Hurley with the woman for the purposes of illicit sex, and at no time during our observation did Hurley ever engage in any inappropriate behavior with anyone, male or female. The report concluded. If Donna had bothered to read the report, she would have known he was innocent of cheating on her. But as usual, she simply saw the photo and came to her own false conclusion. He printed that out and kept ticking. He saw emails from her too, something called, and a tinge of income in which she falsely claimed that her husband was cheating on her and she wanted revenge. He saw emails from the site and read the thread that followed as he read. He felt his blood pressure begin to rise. What happened to him last night was carefully scripted, and he realized she intentionally planned to have him gripped. He printed off the emails and kept ticking. He checked her browser history and found that she had visited several sites similar to the one she contacted. Looking at the site she reached out to, he saw several sample videos where other men, presumably husbands, had been tied down and forced to watch as their wives took several men, all the while putting them down. Some of the husbands were forced to clean out their wives with their tongues. The final humiliation was making the husbands engage in sex. He instantly recognized the men in the videos, T-Bone, CJ, H.A., Jake, Archie Bell, and the other two men whose names he never heard mentioned, which shocked him even more, was that the videos on the site were available to anyone who paid a premium fee. John wasn't stupid. He had seen online code before and knew there had to be a release form filled out, giving site owners permission to publish the videos. He was never given that opportunity and wondered if the other men had signed such a form. He picked up his phone and called Detective Jones. "Jones," the detective said when he answered. "Detective, this is John Hurley. I have some information here you may find interesting." John said, "Can you come to my house?" "Sure," John said. "Let me finish what I'm doing and I'll be right over." "Thanks," John said before ending the call. As he waited for Jones, he preferred to voice search to see if he could tell who owned the site. The registration was done in a way to keep the owner's name private, but he knew that a law enforcement agency could subpoena the record. He also knew which company hosted the site. He printed that out for Jones. About a half hour later, Jones rang the doorbell. "Thanks for coming, Detective," John said, opening the door. "You have something for me?" Jones inquired. "Yes, in my computer room," John said. Jones followed him upstairs and looked over the printouts John gave him. "That corroborates what we found at the house," Jones said. "From what we saw, they've done this to a number of men." "What about release forms?" John asked. "We found a release form signed by the wives," Jones said. "Even your wife signed a release form. We're still going through everything, though." "So she knew this was going on the internet?" John asked. "Looks that way," Jones said. "But what about their husbands?" John asked. "I don't recall seeing anything like that," Jones said, "but like I said, we're still going through all the evidence. Look, I'm going to have to confiscate your wife's computer for evidence." "Go ahead," John said. "I'd like to keep these printouts for my attorney, though. The files are still there in here, you know." Jones nodded his head after giving it a bit of thought. "Sure, but don't destroy them," he said. After Jones left with Donna's computer, John SAT's machine, and had a brainstorm, He began searching some of the Cohen video sites and found several fairly lengthy videos produced by the site. He said through them and saw that in each one, the husband was treated much as he was, while the wife took on all of the other men except for OJ. Each video ended with RJ having sex with the husbands. In the majority of them, the poor saps were just made to suck the larger man's cock to completion. However, Archer Hewlett approached a few of the husbands from behind and carefully examined the 3D printed email from Donna's computer. There it was in black and white. "Just so you know," T-Bone wrote, "we normally wrap up the session with some gay sex involving the husband. Are you okay with that?" Donna responded without ambiguity. "How far does it go? Go as far as you wish, so long as your hubby agrees." T-Bone commented, "I'd like to see him get ducks in the ass." Donna wrote, "Can you do that?" "Sure," T-Bone wrote back. "But he has to consent to that," she explained. "I will make him agree." John believed he felt his blood pressure rise and took deep breaths as he stepped away from the computer. Unfortunately, that was not working. So he took another tablet and headed downstairs. He couldn't bear to be subjected to any more of this. The next day, he went to meet Jenny about their divorce. He made a copy of Donna's emails and carried them with him. When the copy was for Jenny and the other, he would show it to his parents. He arrived at the office a few minutes early and was supervised while riding. Following their greetings, he described his problem to Jenny and showed her the email thread between Donna and T-Bone. Jenny listened without interruption, taking notes as he spoke. She looked over the email exchange and shook her head. "You know, I thought I'd seen everything," she said. "Fortunately for you, the state allows divorce on the grounds of adultery, cruelty, and abuse. I believe this covers all three of those cases. You claim she was arrested and is being jailed without bail." "Yes," John answered. Jenny turned to her computer and nodded a few moments later. "I saw she was arraigned yesterday and charged with a bunch of offenses," she stated. "For starters, there is spousal abuse, sexual assault, a conspiracy to perpetrate collective fraud, and illegal incarceration. Apparently, the judge believed she was dangerous enough to remain in detention. It appears that her accomplices are also being jailed on several accusations, very similar to hers. And you can see that these folks run a website that makes money by posting this garbage on the internet." "Yes," John answered. "I found a few of their videos and they're all basically the same thing." "Do they tell you this before they tie you down?" Jenny asked. "No," John replied. "Did they ask you to sign a release form?" she asked again. "No," John replied. "They made it sound like an anniversary celebration or surprise. They never mentioned anything about sex or selling videos on the internet." "Well, I believe we have a strong case not only against your wife, but also against the men who did this to you, as well as the hosting provider," she stated as John watched. Jenny performed a couple more tasks on her computer before noticing anything else. "Do you know if your wife was offered any royalties for this video?" she asked. "No, I haven't seen anything like that," John replied. She stated that the website seemed to receive a high volume of visitors. "I'll bet they make a lot of money from this picture. Okay, this is what I want to do. I'll draft the divorce papers asking for 90% of everything. In addition, we'll ask for the house and everything else we can get our hands on. The judge may not agree to that, and we may have to negotiate a compromise. That's merely the starting point. We will employ the email threat. And the fact that she is being held without bail provides leverage. If they release her, I'll file a restraining order against her and her accomplices. But I don't think you have much to worry about there. You see, Detective Jones has the video. They need his evidence, which never made it to the internet," she asked. "He has the video," Jones stated. "As far as I know, it never made it to the internet, but she believes it would have." "Yes," he informed her. She nodded her head. "Okay," she replied, taking notes. "I'll speak with him about that video. We will have her serve. If you like, I can bring a civil suit against the website owners and hosting provider." "Yes, it would be okay," John responded. She gazed at him before proceeding. "Do yourself a favor," she advised. "Do not pay your wife a visit. Keep as far away from her as possible. Do not even think about what she did. Allow me and the authorities to deal with it. Based on what you told me, you'd be better off not thinking about her. If you choose, I may connect you with a therapist to help you cope with this. Would that be okay?" John nodded his head. "Yes," John said. "I've tried all I know, yet it still doesn't seem to be enough. No, only breathing and medication keep me in control. but I've never encountered anything like this before. I understand, John, he replied. She gave him a card. I'll phone her right now if you want. Please, John said. She picked up the phone, dialed, and scheduled an appointment for him. When she was done, she grinned and looked at John. Jenny explained that Dr. Sykes indicated she could see you this afternoon at 4 p.m. Will this work for you? John looked at his watch before nodding his head. That will work. Thank you, John said. Good, she said. She added, Here are some things you should do right away, handing him a sheet of paper with a list of tasks to complete. The most of it involved the bank, so he decided to take care of it after his appointment with Jenny. He said, I'll take care of it right away. Terrific, she said. Listen, I understand how difficult this has been for you, so please rest, relax, and allow us to handle things. Do you understand? I do, he said. Good, she said. Do not worry, John. Everything will work out, and you will be able to move forward with your life. He thanked her and departed, leaving a healthy retainer. He then went to the bank, paid and closed their shared credit cards, and took 10% of their total balance. Then he created a new account in his name exclusively and applied for a new credit card. He then proceeded to his parents' house and described what had transpired, showing them the email exchange between Donna and Thibault. He shocked them when he revealed what he knew. This is bad for his mother, Marcia said. I cannot believe she would do something like this. Are you certain you didn't cheat on her? Marcia, I love Donna with all of my heart, and I never considered cheating on her, John remarked. She saw a photo of me having dinner with my baby sister and assumed we were having an affair. She didn't bother reading the report. If she had, this most likely would not have happened. She shakes her head. I'm not sure what to tell you, John, she said. I'm sincerely sorry that this occurred to you. Me too, John replied. Please do me a favor and keep in touch, she asked. We've always thought of you as our son. We never had. I'll do that, Marcia, he replied. By the way, the car is still at that guy's home. I'll give you the keys if you want to go pick them up. I'll bring her stuff later today, or perhaps this weekend. Okay. Thank you, she said. He needed to do the keys and give her the address. He had just enough time to make it to his appointment with Dr. Sex. Dr. Sex. Rhonda, too, her friends and patients listened to John's narrative and remained silent until he finished. I've heard of your disease, but I've never met anyone who has been diagnosed with it, she explained. And you say you've been practicing martial arts to keep it under control? Yes, John advised me to do breathing exercises in addition to taking blood pressure medicine. It normally works quickly, and I hadn't used it much until recently. Are you still pursuing martial arts training? She asked. Yes, John answered. She suggested we try some meditation techniques. Would you be open to that? I would, John replied. Good, she said. We have a lot of work to do, John, but I believe we can get you through this without any additional drugs. I'd prefer that, John remarked. He departed and returned home, where he backed up all of his belongings, including their wedding photos and her wedding dress. He gazed around at the book sets and trinkets she'd accumulated over the years. They meant nothing to him now, and he didn't want anything in the house that reminded him of her. That weekend, he changed the locks on the house, delivered his belongings to her parents, and completed his customary weekend yard work. On Sunday, he discovered an app that suggested it would help him relax, so he downloaded it into his phone and practiced breathing exercises while listening to the sound of rain. After about a half hour, he felt like his old self and chose to go to work the next day. Things were quiet for John over the following few weeks. He went to work, returned home, watched television, relaxed, and went to sleep. The apartment seemed much calmer without meals, and he appreciated being able to do anything he wanted without being constantly accused. The therapy sessions with Rhonda were quite beneficial, and he found the relaxation techniques she recommended to be extremely beneficial. He remained in contact with Jenny, who stated that she would wait until after his trial to have her served for thinking. Was that if she was a convicted felon, the divorce would go more smoothly. The day of Donna's trial arrived, and he was asked to testify, which he gladly accepted. The jury was stunned when the tape presented his case, which included John's testimony, and they returned guilty verdicts on all charges in just a few hours. The judge had no pity for her either, sentencing her to the maximum sentence permissible under state law, 20 years. She would be available for parole in 15 years, the judge stated, and as she was being released, a process server stepped forward. He checked her identity and gave her a manila packet. "You've been served," he explained. "Defeated Donald." I signed the papers and handed them back. "Have a good day." The server spoke as he accepted him. She glanced at John with tears in her eyes, but he simply averted his gaze. Deputies led her out and drove her to the vehicle. They were transferred to the state women's prison. A few months later, John discovered from Janet that Donna had been pregnant from her bang-bang, but the pregnancy had also resulted in a miscarriage. Ducking back. John reflected that the trials against T-Bone and his gang had taken much longer. Detective Jones discovered a plethora of evidence indicating that they had harmed up to 15 men over the last 13 months. They discovered what appeared to be releases signed by the husbands they had targeted with the men they had tracked down. However, the releases were made after the fact and under duress, complicating matters further. Furthermore, proprietors have shared personal information about the males they targeted. At least 3 of the victims committed suicide as a result of what happened to them. By the end, all of the individuals involved had been sentenced to 25 years of hard labor. The site was demolished, and all of the victims, or at least all of the guys Jenny's team of attorneys could find, were awarded a large sum of money, bankrupting T-Bone and his associates. The hosting providers reached an agreement with the men, which added to the pot. Jenny presented John with a $2 million check, and he broke down crying. While he appreciated the reparation, the money did little to heal his shattered heart. She told John Hurley, "You're a good man. There are plenty of good women out there who would want to be with you. You will find her." "Thank you, Jenny," he said. Maybe one day John continued to attend his therapist, who helped him deal with his problems over the next 2 years. He buried himself in his work and dated sometimes, but only in the last few months has he dated the same woman more than once. "He has a lot of problems to deal with," his therapist wrote as she transcribed her notes, "but on the plus side, he hasn't had any new episodes and appears to be making progress. I think he'll be all right in the long term." "I hope so," Rhonda reasoned. Here is the next story. Consider this. In huge events, minute details can frequently make or destroy them. Consider the 1986 Challenger catastrophe, in which a cheap O-ring resulted in the loss of 7 lives and hundreds of millions of dollars. Similarly, a minute blood clot that is barely visible under a microscope can be fatal because it prevents blood flow to a key area of the brain. Even a small patch of ice on the road can cause a vehicle to spin out of control, leading to a fatal catastrophe. The list goes on. Seemingly tiny issues can have disastrous implications for major initiatives. Marriage is undoubtedly one of life's most significant endeavors. I, for one, hold my marriage in high regard. I've been married to my lovely wife, April, for just over 8 years. We have 2 wonderful sons, Chris and Charles. While I did not get a college degree, my talents as a mechanic have allowed us to live comfortably in a large home. Despite the lengthy hours I put in at my job, the financial stability it provides makes it worthwhile. My marriage has always been the highlight of my life, and I've worked hard to provide for my family. Unfortunately, it is frequently the minor details that unravel such important promises. In my situation, the descent was triggered by a little blood vessel in my brain. Its closeness to another vessel caused swelling, resulting in a painful migraine headache. I had one such event on a very tragic day. The symptoms were familiar: sensitivity to light, loud noises, and unpleasant scents. The unexpected onset of intense agony took me off guard. Without my Imitrex inhaler, I had no way to relieve the pain while I still had tablets on hand. They were less effective and took longer to reduce the pain to a reasonable level, preventing me from working. I stumbled into my boss's office and broke the bad news. He instantly took action, summoning his secretary Penny, and ordered her to carefully transport me home, insisting that I do not drive. My manager carefully walked me out of the office and down the corridor towards the exit, urging me to leave immediately. Penny helped me lean against the wall to protect my eyes from the intense sun while she walked to her car. I closed my eyes firmly and put my hands against my temples, attempting to relieve the pounding ache. As we drove, my vision blurred and the light became unpleasant, so I had to keep my eyes closed. The sounds surrounding me intensified into an unbearable whirl, and the terrible odor made my stomach turn. Thankfully, Penny knew the way to my house, so I didn't have to give her directions. It seemed like an eternity, but she soon stopped up outside my house, assisted me out of the car, and took me inside. I followed her lead, scarcely capable of walking on my own. Once in the kitchen, I told Penny to get her inhaler from the refrigerator. She put it in my hand and kept it firmly while I inserted it into my nose, inhaling deeply as the drug entered my bloodstream. Then I requested her to take me to the living room next to the kitchen and help me onto the sofa. I asked her to draw the shades and turn off all the lights, which she swiftly did. After a few minutes, I could feel some relief coming in, so I assured Penny she could leave. Gratefully, I thanked her for her assistance and enjoyed the calm and quiet as she left. I must have fallen asleep soon as the agony subsided, for I awoke later to the sound of voices. The room was dark, indicating that I would most likely recollect my surroundings later in the day. The pain went instantly, leaving me sore yet relieved of the migraine's leftovers. I sat up slowly and waited, almost expecting the pain to return. But it did not. She had left, thank God. In the dimness, I recognized my wife, April, and her neighbor friend, Robin. Given the darkness and the lights that were still turned off, they appeared to be ignorant of my presence. Perhaps April imagined I was relaxing after arriving home early. However, my automobile was not parked in the driveway. She probably didn't realize I was here. Perhaps I can surprise them both. I rose gently, intending to creep to the entrance and then make myself known. But as I listened in on their talk, I thought, "Come on, April, how was it? Was it as good as before? Give me the details, girl. It was great. I felt as though I was in heaven. Even better than the prior time, I swear. Almost mind-blowing. The best physical engagement ever. Better than with Chris. Better than your husband? Hell, sure. I adore Chris, but he has never made me feel that way. Never. I would not let him do those things. He'd think I was a strumpet. But Carl knows, and I like it. I can't wait until next time. Aren't you worried Chris will find out? Have you considered the consequences? Chris will never know, and even if he does, so what? He is too wonderful to abandon me. He would not risk losing the children. I would take them in a heartbeat with a skilled lawyer. This is not like you, April. It's worrying. I believe you are making a huge mistake. I adore Chris, truly. But I refuse to give up what I have with Carl. I want to be passionate with Carl and in love with Chris. I need both, and I will not let go. I have had my fill, though. The migraine subsided. The pain in my heart was much worse. It clutched me so hard that my stomach knotted, and every breath was a battle. My ears rang and my heart raced. Fear flooded through me as if a heart attack was imminent, and I gripped to the doorframe until some sense of peace returned to my body. Nonetheless, I kept my presence disguised. But with each regained moment of control, rage boiled within me, ready to boil. With determination, I stood up and entered the brightly lit kitchen. Robin was the first to see me, breaking the silence, her eyes widening in disbelief before falling silent. April, noticing Robin's reaction, turned to face me. Her expression quickly shifted from contentment to amazement, horror, and anger. April sprang up and pushed her chair back, confronting me. "How much have you heard? Why were you lurking and spying on me?" she demanded. I met her stare in quiet before looking at Robin, who quickly excused herself. "I need to leave, Pete. If you need some time away, I can look after the lads." "I'll call you later," she murmured, running out the side door. I watched her leave without saying anything. Left alone, I returned my attention to April, the lady I had loved unconditionally for 8 lovely years. 8 years I had imagined would stretch into eternity, where we'd grow old together. But tonight, that expectation was destroyed. There would be no forever for us. April ended it all tonight. Where are the boys? What were you doing while you were having fun with your lover? Did you ever think about them? Or were you too busy having fun with someone else that you left them alone? Now I am calm and collected. The ache remains acute and profound. It will take some time for everything to settle down. April's face twisted with rage, concealing her beauty with ugly. Perhaps that disguise represented the actual April. Hidden beneath the surface all along, she replied, "The boys are with Kaylee. Robin and I went shopping, and Pete kept an eye on them. And I was not with anyone else. Just Robin." With that statement, she appeared to be triumphant. The rage on her face turned into gratifying activity. She finally realized I was at home and inquired, What are you doing here? Where is your car, and why were you sitting in darkness? Were you spying on me? Is someone trying to catch me in the act? I arrived home early with a bad migraine. George requested that Penny drive me home because I was unable to handle the light. I took the Imitrex and fell asleep. I have been here ever since. My stomach twisted and I felt compelled to puke. I got up and hurried to the restroom. Your sounds awakened me, and what I heard made me sick. I need to go to the bathroom. With those remarks, I hurried to the bathroom, hoping to vomit the contents of my stomach. It was not fully successful, but my body did its best. I settled on the bathroom floor, feeling relieved as my body relaxed against the cool porcelain. My stomach finally settled down and my breathing became more even. The moisture on my face dried as the nausea subsided. After a few moments, I got up, spraying water on my face and washing my mouth. Once the trembling faded and I regained my composure, I returned to the kitchen, where April was sitting, gazing out the window. I'm going to get the boys and put them to bed tonight. Brushing past her, I exited, heading next door to the Andersons. Pete and Robin Anderson were not only our neighbors, but also great friends. We'd spent endless evenings conversing and drinking. Best pals, I mused angrily. I wondered what Pete knew. I should have asked before knocking on their back door. When I entered, Robin was seated at the kitchen table, conversing with her husband. I sensed she had informed him. As I entered, he looked up, sympathy in his eyes. Robin seemed noticeably nervous. I have come to grab the boys. Are they ready to go home? I walked by Pete and into the living room, where I assumed the boys were with their teenage daughter, Carly. They were crowded around a puzzle. Carly was watching over them as I entered, and she smiled at me. Hello, Mr. Phillips. Are you here for them? When I nodded, she continued. I'll grab their jackets. I stood there watching them, overcome with melancholy. These situations, which had once been filled with ordinary delight, now carried the imprint of adultery, the innocence of family life broken by adults' greed. In many situations, the damage is irreparable. It seemed like one of those times. Thank you, Carly. I will be in the kitchen when they are ready. I returned to the kitchen where PD and Robin were seated. I looked at Robin and then at PD. Did you two know? Did you know she cheated on me? Pete, did knowing while we were together give you some twisted satisfaction? Did it give you a nasty thrill? My rage drove me to use stronger language than was warranted, but I needed answers from my dearest pals. I should have sensed something. Pete glanced at Robin, his rage palpable, before responding. I promise, friend, I had no idea. If I had known, I would have informed you straight away. I can't believe my wife knew but concealed it from me. It is despicable. You do not deserve this. I won't apologize to her, but I'll be there for you if you need me. His eyes hardened as he glanced at his wife. I believed him. He would have told me if he knew. So there was Robin and April's secret. Thank you, Robin, I sneered. Thank you for making me chuckle. A betrayed man, a fool who had no need to know his wife was having an affair with another man. I hope that is okay with you. Knowing what you knew while thinking about me, I turned to see Carly approaching quickly, smiling as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I prayed silently. Carly had not overheard my previous comments, but the expression on her face said otherwise. This was the final moment Robin will spend with my boys. That much I promised. I wasn't sure how, but I will figure it out. We entered through the back door, and the lads hurried upstairs to change before dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dimly lit living room where April sat, keeping the space dark, much like the secrets she kept. I lighted the space by turning on a nearby lamp and pulled back the curtains, displaying shadows that hinted at the hidden facts of my formerly beloved wife. April was horrible, with tears streaking her eyes, a pallid complexion, and slouched shoulders. All of her defiance had melted away, leaving behind the scared woman I had anticipated. However, it felt too late for such a metamorphosis. Instead of providing comfort, her sudden vulnerability horrified me. Was she sincerely remorseful or just scared? I could not believe how much had changed in only a few minutes. No, this was the first shot in our power struggle, a deceptive waif who hides her infidelity. Her face revealed her true feelings, not regret, but dishonesty and guile. I confronted her and demanded, "Who is he? What does he give that I do not?" She remained silent until I knew she would not react. When I turned to go, she finally said, His identity is irrelevant. It isn't about you, Christopher. I'm truly sorry you found out in this way. I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted you to learn this. I am sincerely sorry. You overheard my talk with Robin. Please, you must comprehend. It's funny. No apologies for the action. There is no remorse for what occurred, only regret for being caught. And you are learning the truth. I shook my head and sank into the comfortable recliner she gave me on our 5th anniversary. I used to appreciate it, but now it was simply furniture. Please allow me to clarify. Our tale does not need to end here. We can salvage what we have. If only you tried to comprehend. We could move forwards. She begged with me, using a familiar expression. When she sought something that I disagreed with. Can you promise that once it's over, you won't see him again? I kept a calm demeanor, but my body tightened, my hands tightly holding the chair's armrests for stability. April met my gaze with tear-filled eyes, but did not respond. The stillness said volumes. She wouldn't stop. I overheard her statements to Robin. She saw both options and refused to let me stop her. She was unwilling to give him up and sought my approval. I feel this is your decision. After dinner, I will tuck the boys in. Then we can consider our options. Tomorrow, I'll pack my possessions and stay with my brother. Rising, I exited into the kitchen, a safe haven in the midst of upheaval. It's strange how the kitchen becomes a haven in difficult times. Strange thoughts emerge while your reality crumbles. It's even stranger to discover your world is collapsing. April preoccupied herself with dinner, while I spent precious time with the lads in the playroom, immersed in their game. April summoned us for dinner, causing a raucous transition as I escorted the guys to the bathroom to wash up. Mundane tasks that anchor in chaos. Dinner was boisterous. The boys, full of vitality, enjoyed the lunch and each other's company, in stark contrast to their quiet parents who were deep in thought about upcoming decisions. The innocence of childhood is melting away. Why do kids want to grow up? They see adult freedom as limitless, heedless of the consequences and obligations. Adults, on the other hand, understand more well. However, some disrespect boundaries and consequences. After dinner, April cleaned the kitchen as I took the lads to bed. We told stories till they calmed down, drifting into oblivion, where dreams had no bounds. My heart ached while I watched, knowing this too must come to an end. Downstairs, I sank into a chair, clutching for support. My world went away beyond my control. Even though I adored April, her comments rang in my head. He never made me feel like this, and I am his strumpet. As I considered the alternatives, I couldn't turn away from those words. I felt the love within me vanish. April entered and took her seat. We need to talk. I understand how unhappy you are, but you must understand my point of view. What I share with Carl is entirely physical, with the allure of novelty. I expect it to vanish shortly, but I can't seem to break free. It's what motivates me. However, this has no bearing on my feelings for you. He's just a distraction. It will end soon, and we can go back to how things were. You simply have to let things run its course. Her words flowed, but I fought to understand. I'm unable to resist this. I can't quit seeing him. Should I let this continue? Is she unreasonable or simply deluded? Regardless, it must end. You're clearly the one who doesn't understand reality. There is no us. There is no we. It is just you and him. That is all that remains. It is over between us. Finished. Done. This is not negotiable, and I will not budge. You have to grasp this. Despite 8 years of marriage, you cannot imagine I would condone your affair. But I love you, Chris. You are the only man I've ever loved. I don't even like Carl. Please try to comprehend. Give me time. Please, baby. Please give me some time for our marriage and family. Take as much time as you need. Tomorrow, I will contact a lawyer, and we will divide everything equally. I do not want to hurt you the way you hurt me. I simply want this to end now, emotionally depleted. I long to retire to bed, seeking solace from the pain. My headache had eased, but the misery persisted. I was unprepared for her. Next words, then, damn, divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way, taking everything you've got. I'll make sure you don't obtain custody of the boys, and I will limit your visitation rights in every way possible. If you do not cooperate, you will forfeit everything. And I will still have Carl. You cannot stop me. Remember that? I absorbed her threat. Then it occurred to me that this marriage had ended long ago. The intensity of rage and disdain was not sudden. It was calculated and purposeful. She never worried about injuring me. If she had, she wouldn't have chosen this path. She would have halted it earlier. Instead of ending her affair, she expected my discovery. She chose to inflict maximum misery on me. Love has no place here, only selfishness and the desire to degrade me. As my rage grew, I noticed her face indicating that she had gone too far. Her smile, distorted by her caustic remarks, changed from happiness to fear. My words followed. I just have one thing to say, April. When you corner a rat, it will fight back. It will fight until the bitter end, if you deny it any means of escape. You should have known that before you pushed me. But now you've done it, and you'll pay the consequences. Please, Chris, I do not want this, but I have no choice. I adore you and will do anything to keep you from leaving. If you don't comprehend or accept this, I'll fight you. You will have no choice but to stay with me. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to go. I know, Chris. You will stay. Goodbye, April. Let the boys know. I'll see them whenever I can. I will gather my belongings and leave. I'll get the remainder later when we can set a time. Upstairs. I rapidly packed a bag for a day or two, just the essentials from the bathroom, several changes of clothes, not much, following 8 years of marriage. All that was left were painful memories. But I have 2 amazing sons. That was my concentration right now. Descending, I discovered April sat near the kitchen entrance. Clearly, she was willing to try again. Chris, please reconsider. I am imploring you. There is no necessity. Promise me that you'll terminate things with him. You will never see him again. Just say it, and maybe there is hope. I cannot. I simply can't. Please. I pushed past her, suppressing the temptation to strike her with all of my strength. But I knew it would be difficult to contain my own wrath, so I restrained myself. I'll come in the evenings after work so the guys don't notice anything right away. I pulled open the door and went outdoors. It slammed shut behind me as I threw my stuff in the back seat and climbed into my truck. Backing out of the garage, I called my brother Clyde on my cell phone. He resided approximately 10 miles away. Since his wife departed with her boyfriend 2 years ago, he's been living alone. She had no idea where she was and seemed unconcerned about her absence. Despite not getting divorced, Clyde refused to let it hold him back. He'd become a heavy drinker, feasting with his mates practically every night. We discussed it, but Clyde did not change his habits. He rarely drank, however. He was only generally high. Perhaps he was attempting to bury memories. That was my perspective, at least. He listened as I explained and told me to come over. He'd get home later, so I drove to his house, got the extra key from under the flower pot on the porch, and let myself in. Everything was immaculate as usual. Clyde was far from messy. He was obsessively neat. This had always been the case. It was comforting to see that, despite my life falling, his remained unchanged. I grabbed a few beers from the fridge and nestled in just as he had suggested when he returned. I felt pleasantly drunk. I got another beer from the store and kept drinking. When Clyde came, I simply informed him of the incident with April, and he joined in drinking the rest of his beer to keep me under control. He reassured me of his support and emphasized our brotherhood. The next morning, I awakened with a severe hangover and a pounding headache. I was fully responsible for my excessive drinking. Despite having grounds, it was not an excuse. I stumbled into the shower and let the cool water wash away the dregs of the intoxicant in my system. Being intoxicated serves no purpose. I looked for Clyde and found a message saying that he was at work and would report me, which was not surprising given that we both worked Saturday shifts. Clyde and I were employed by a company that rented heavy construction equipment to major contractors across the state. Our reputation as excellent mechanics lured customers from far and wide. Our goal was to keep the machines operating regardless of the obstacles. The job required hard hours but offered sufficient revenue to sustain my family, a responsibility I couldn't avoid. I saw the need of continuing to generate money to support April's pride and joy. The residence is big. I saw it as a safe refuge for our family, and it gave me great pride to provide for them. April, on the other hand, appeared to see it differently. It was a safety net, a bargaining chip in the event of divorce. She wanted the house from my money, not for our family's stability, but to support pleasures for her lover. Lavish apparel and Victoria's Secret lingerie purchases. Despite the fact that I was running late, I cranked up the faucet to drown out these uncomfortable thoughts. I needed to get away to work, where I could concentrate, strategize, and make judgments, tasks I couldn't complete in my current state. April had evidently planned this in advance, anticipating my astonishment at discovering her betrayal and knowing I would be unable to think straight. She had manipulated the issue to make me the villain for objecting to her affair. I dressed and went to get a box of huge garbage bags, hoping to stack the deck in her favor before April left with the boys for her mother's place. Inside, I emptied my wardrobe and drawers into the bags, transferring critical goods from the bathroom to a smaller suitcase stuffed with bags. I loaded them into my truck's back seat and went back inside. I would not leave just yet. I planned to return after work to spend time with the children. I had a lot to think about before making a decision. One thing was certain. My marriage was finished, and April would never be my wife, lover, or confidant. She belonged to someone else now. As I reflected, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I sunk to the floor of what was once our bedroom, succumbing to grief. Loss has a significant impact, particularly in the workplace. I immersed myself into my job, working tirelessly even during lunch breaks, eager to block off thoughts of home, wife, and children. Despite the problems of fuel injectors, timing chains, and gasoline pumps, I completed the most difficult duties without complaint, consumed with a need to immerse oneself in work. 10 hours later, Clyde intervened, asking me to take a break. "Dude is awake. You make the rest of us look like slackers," he commented, looking at me with a mix of surprise and anxiety. "Sorry, younger brother, I'm just trying to lose myself in it all, just trying to forget my mistakes." I must have been on the edge of tears when Clyde led me off the shop floor and into the braking area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' sad accident a decade before. He was my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago he became my boys' godfather, Chris Jr. and Charlie. I sat at the table, staring blankly as Clyde poured us each a cup of hot coffee, devoid of flavor but comfortingly warm. "Okay, spill it. Lay everything out." Clyde encouraged me to retell the incident in detail. For the next 10 minutes, I poured out to Clyde. April piled every ounce of shame, humiliation, and contempt on me. I revealed her intimidating threats and premeditated efforts to sabotage any reaction on my part while protecting her affair. I remembered her disdainful expression as she boasted to Robin about her tryst, as well as her steely determination in threatening to take everything away from me. She made it very apparent that her lover's gratification was most important, unwilling to give him up for anything. Clyde was taken aback. He had always admired April, thinking her as a virtuous woman and devoted mother. His brother had never mentioned any marriage problems, leading Clyde to believe their relationship was strong. Clyde found it painful to observe Chris's pain and anguish. Chris was a rock of strength, a devoted parent, a dependable provider, and a confidant to the boys in the garage, always available when needed. Over the years, he has gone above and beyond to assist others. Clyde's disbelief, however, gave way to wrath. How could April have done this to Chris? What exactly was wrong with her? His anger grew as he saw his brother and closest friend crushed and defeated. "Chris, listen to me. You cannot just accept this. We need to take action. Let me and the boys help. This is awful." Clyde's rough features reflected anxiety. It was a real concern for his sibling. There was a palpable feeling in the air. Chris returned his look with a forlorn face. "What can I do? If I divorce her, she would deprive me of everything. Child support, alimony, the home, the car. I would never injure the children. She is using them as pawns against me. And now the idiot she's joking around with will take their father's place. He is an imbecile who believes it is acceptable to beat another man's wife. I am powerless." Clyde shook his head vigorously. "To heck with both of them. I used to adore April like a sister, but she has made her bed, and now she will have to lie in it. We have to go after both of them. First step, find out who he is. That's the easiest part." "Let me make a few calls and then we'll talk," Clyde declared. I just shrugged. "All right, but I am not sure what you are expecting me to do. She doesn't talk about him with me. Does not matter. We'll follow him out and expose him in the same way we would anyone else. And you realize you can't have April back, right? What she done renders reconciliation impossible. If you can engage in interactions, she will never respect you again. No way, dude. She is now another person's plaything. His statements caught me off surprise for a second, but then a little smile appeared on my face. You're correct. She isn't my darling wife anymore. Last night I learned how quickly love can turn into hatred, and my resentment toward her today surpasses any affection I've ever had for her. Last night she stole it from me and used it against herself. I made it obvious to her. We talked for a little longer before wrapping the work without any additional hours. We went to a local tavern with no intention of drinking. This was business. Plans have to be created. Clyde made a couple more calls before we settled down to strategize. I was moved by my friends' unfailing support. They didn't probe, just wanted to know how they could help. We worked together to design a reasonable approach. At 7 p.m., I pulled into my driveway and entered the home. It struck me as humorous. This was no longer my house. It was simply a place to stay. I took off my jacket in the kitchen and made my way to the living room. There. April sat on her chair, watching our 5-year-old twins, Chris and Charlie, play a computer game. I stood there, retaining the sight in my head indefinitely. April met my eyes as I looked at her, her slight smile expressing her true hatred for me and our facade of family unity. It was all a ruse created by her lies. Now I see and understand. I returned her glance with scorn and no grin. When I turned away, she averted her gaze and headed toward the kitchen. I looked into the fridge and pulled out what appeared to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes to reheat in the microwave. I wasn't hungry, but I wanted a distraction. I had planned to speak with the boys before they went to bed, but Clyde encouraged me to postpone the topic for now. However, when I do address them, it will be the first move in the struggle started by April. I might have lost, undoubtedly, but I'd fight till the end. Seated with my plate, I began to eat slowly, the food providing little satisfaction but was vital for survival. About halfway through, April arrived at the table and sat across from me. I cast a fleeting glance at her before returning my attention to my meal, eating carefully. No words were exchanged. I didn't have anything to say to her at the moment. Do you feel more composed after last night? Can we have a reasonable conversation now? Her remarks took me off guard. Civilized adults. What about a cheating lady and her betrayed spouse? That is more practical, choosing silence instead. I held back my answer. Are you going to ignore me now? Acting childishly and silently. I had higher expectations for you, Chris. We need to think about the children right now. You must remember your responsibility as their father in this home. Am I really their father now? It makes me ponder. Perhaps I should confirm with some testing. Let us keep this civil and without anger. Just a simple statement. April's face clouded with rage, ready to retaliate when I quietly intervened. April, be mindful of your tone of voice. If you begin to shout, the children may overhear. Remember them? The ones you accused me of ignoring last night when I became agitated. So now it's your turn to recall. Consider what you've done to their world. You not only had an affair, but you broke our entire family. Think carefully, April. April hesitated, her voice dropping to a hiss. You didn't appear to take my statements seriously last night. I expected you to get over this and go back to normal. Nothing will change in the home. I still love you, and you're my husband. That is not altered. Neither you nor your children will lose anything familiar. I keep my affairs private, performing my business while kids are at school, and you are at work. You've got nothing to lose. I am always here for you. I remain mute. I continued to eat slowly, keeping a stern countenance devoid of emotion. My eyes revealed nothing as I glanced at her. Despite the lack of spoken answer, my eyes communicated everything. April gradually began to understand the enormity of the situation. For the first time, she felt a pang of terror. What do you plan to do? Will you make it harder for me? I hoped you loved me enough to give me this time alone. I told you last night that he took nothing from you and that I will always support you. Why can't you understand that? April became more upset as I continued to stare at her, quietly chewing my food. Finally swallowing, I recommended that we postpone this talk until after the kids had gone to bed. I listened to you last night, despite how uncomfortable I felt, but I will not engage in this conversation while the children are awake. April seemed to regain her calm and resumed smiling. Thank you for that. I believe you made some true points, yet your remarks hurt me. I'll take the boys upstairs shortly and then we can talk. She passed past me and placed her hand on my shoulder. I flinched involuntarily at her touch, prompting her to withdraw her hand. The anger I felt at that little action was palpable. I tried to be myself among the kids, despite the fact that everything was going to change. However, I had come to accept that April's actions had ruined everything for me. Perhaps I should just be the compliant husband and accept her terms. Wait till she's finished with her affair. After all, hadn't she said she still loved me and wanted to stay married? But I knew I could not do it. Not now. Not ever again. Around 9 a.m., April entered the room where I was sitting, letting out a deep sigh. She sat in a chair and grinned. I put them to bed and they fell asleep. They are too large to tuck in, yet they still say goodnight and pretend to sleep. They are good boys. I nodded in accord. They're beautiful children. It's awful that they'll have to go through so much anguish, and I'm not sure how to alleviate their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you knew that nothing needed to change. Just give me what I want and we can go back to being the same family. Please be patient. I promised everything will be over shortly. You will not lose anything. I sincerely love you and wish to remain your wife. It's just something I need to do. That is all. I looked at the woman who had been my wife for the previous 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine living without her. We had 2 wonderful children and a strong marriage until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't see why I thought it was important. I wouldn't get into the details tonight, but I needed to be clear. April, I heard you out last night. You expressed your desires clearly. You said you loved me and wanted to be my wife. You insist that he doesn't take anything from me. He refused to reveal his identification because it was none of my business, and you explain what would happen if I filed for divorce. You've made it perfectly plain that you will take everything from me without hesitation. Exactly like you stated. You've threatened to steal everything, even my boys. That much was apparent. April listened. Her face is angry. She was not satisfied with my summary of her words. Whatever they sounded like, they felt different coming from me. But she understood the truth in what I said. Chris, I believe you do not share my perspective on this scenario. I want to underline that this is not about our marriage. Nonetheless, you ignored my words. Why can't you believe me when I say that I still love you and want to keep our marriage? What I heard from you last night, April, was contempt, disdain for me and our marriage. When I expressed my frustration, you responded with deliberate threats, threats that you thoroughly weighed before contacting me. Disdain for me. Despite all of my efforts on our behalf over the years, you ridicule, demean, threaten, and accuse me of misunderstanding. You were completely aware that I would react just as I did. Why did you assume you already knew what to do with me? Why did you think you had all the answers ready? Now I was starting to become angry. Until now, I had remained calm and in control. But his poise was melting away. April's outraged expression irritated me. I came to one conclusion, that you appear to overlook last night, April, when you threatened and forced me into a corner, believing I couldn't get out. I mentioned it then, and will repeat it now. Even a rat will fight a cat when it is cornered and has nothing to lose. With these words, I stood and went away. As I approached the kitchen door where April was sitting, I halted. I'm going to stay someplace for the night. I'll return after work so the kids don't notice anything immediately. Why are you intending on staying somewhere else? Why not stay here? We cannot handle this problem if you depart. Chris, please don't. I adore you and do not want to lose you. I am not sure what I will do if you leave me. Please, Chris, let's try to address this. There must be a way to reconcile. I apologize, April. The only certainty I have right now is that I no longer love you. Your cheating last night ruined my love for you. That's all I know for sure. I'm not sure what I'll do next, but I know there's no turning back now. Chris, how about your vows? To love and cherish me. Have you forgotten them? I also remember your vows to me. On our wedding day, you promised to put everything else aside, but you didn't. You pledged to just love me, but you shared what we had with another man. I cared for you, loved you, honored our marriage vows, and gave you all I had. It was not sufficient. You conferred something upon someone else. You handed it away, breaking my heart in the process. So, absolutely, I can get past this. You shattered my love for you to pieces. I can leave, and I will. I went to Clyde's place, and he invited me to stay as long as I needed. It's time to finish what we started. Soon, It will all be over, and I will start over. In the coming days, I balanced work with evenings spent with my children. However, I avoided any additional interactions with April. Despite her attempts to engage, I walked away every time. She yelled once, but I just left without saying anything during a work break. A colleague informed Clyde that the preparations were complete and that we will have results in a few days. All that was left was patience. The schedule remained unchanged until the next week. Every evening, I returned to a more agitated April. The kids were unconcerned, but Charlie's question about my long hours provided reassurance. He appeared satisfied, and the brief crisis subsided. April persisted with her queries, but I ignored her and left after she put the kids to bed. By the conclusion of the week, Clyde had entered the break room and handed me a folder. Without saying anything, I opened it and found a brief report. Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old junior attorney at Lincoln Rice and Holmes, got divorced 2 years ago. Financially secure, dwelling in a condominium that April had visited several times that week. Now that I had his name and address, I wondered what attraction he possessed that had evaded me. However, it was no longer my concern. Had April approached me earlier, perhaps this situation could have been handled differently. So what happens next? What steps should I take? I sought Clyde's advice, despite the problem was mine. Clyde seemed to be the one in charge. I felt blessed to have friends and a brother like Clyde. Being a kind man and a hard worker was enough for loyal friends. Now I needed them more than ever. Everything is under progress. The first move occurs tonight. I'll call you once everything is arranged. Simply keep your phone close. You can inform her and put an end to this situation. Okay. Knowing what needed to be done did not provide relief. This was not my preferred strategy. However, April and her lover gave me no choice but to fight back. This is the only way I could. I wasn't an attorney or a rich strategist. I was a mechanic, an industrious individual who was proud to provide for his family through honest works. April has a special meaning for me, but my efforts were insufficient for her. Fine, my plan was compatible with my world and she would soon realize it. When I returned home, I joined my family for dinner as usual. April interacted with the children, and I participated in conversations and activities while concealing my nervousness. After dinner, I spent quality time with the kids, playing video games and helping with homework, playing the typical husband and father. April, who had just finished the dishes, looked around, appearing more at ease, as if she expected everything to return to normal soon. Carl Cummings left his office and drove across town, while I was playing video games with my boys. He reflected on the intense encounter with April at his house 2 days prior. When he asked why, she was relieved that he had finally agreed to get close. Following their rendezvous, she revealed that her husband had discovered their affair. Carl was shocked, but she reassured him not to worry. It struck him as strange that her husband's knowledge seemed to increase her adventurousness. Regardless, it was the best physical, engaging experience he'd had, so he dismissed it. Walking past an alley toward his car, he stumbled and felt a pull as he struggled to keep his balance and avoid falling. Someone grabbed his arms and dragged him down the alley to the courtyard, where he was pinned against the building's wall by 2 imposing figures, one on either side. He tried to see their faces beneath their black ski masks. Despite their intimidating size, fear began to creep over him as he had little money and no flashy accessories. He wondered what they wanted. A third masked man wearing gloves stepped forward, lifting Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. In a firm tone, he asked, "Are you familiar with a woman named April Phillips?" "Idiot." Carl got a shiver down his spine when he heard her name. "No, so that's what this is about? Her darn husband? She never mentioned that he was involved. No, I don't know anyone with that name," he stammered, shaking but determined to deny everything. The heavy man delivered a blow to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and stealing his breath. Dizzy, he noticed stars swirling before him. The intense agony gripped him, instilling deep fear. "I'll ask again. You're familiar with a woman named April Phillips?" Idiot. Unable to deceive any longer, Carl abandoned denial. "Yes, I know her. Please, God, let me make it out of here alive." He prayed silently. "You'll never cross paths with her again." "Clear." The imposing figure awaited his response. "Crystal clear. I get it." Perhaps it was merely a warning. I get it. He could accept that. I need to ensure you grasp this fully. My pals and I aren't convinced someone like you messing with other men's wives is all that bright. So we're going to ensure you comprehend, the big man explained ominously, ceasing their pressure against the wall. They allowed him to steady himself. The initial blows struck him hard in the groin, causing him to double over. Despite his agony, they prevented him from collapsing, delivering another blow to his ribs. A sharp click signaled a broken rib. Then came a devastating blow to his jaw, nearly toppling him with pain. Subsequent strikes hit him in the groin until, mercifully, he blacked out. They likely continued their assault until they ceased, gradually brought back to consciousness. They drilled a few words into him repeatedly. His memory faded until he awoke in Memorial Hospital's emergency room. While his injuries weren't life-threatening, he was admitted to the general care unit, heavily medicated and in intense pain, grateful for his survival. He whispered a prayer. They informed him that she might contact him, instructing him precisely what to say. He recalled the words he needed to convey to her. "I deeply apologize, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault, and I deeply regret it. I will cease all contact with you and your children. I'm sorry our paths ever crossed. Farewell." Carl reclined on the bed awaiting her call. He rehearsed these words in his mind to avoid any errors. He reminded himself that any deviation would not go unnoticed and the consequences would be severe. Repeating the phrases to himself once more, he vowed never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of who she may be. Just past 8 in the evening, while playing with the twins, my cell phone rang. Excusing myself to another room, I took the call. Seeing Clyde's caller ID, I heard a brief message. "It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He was admitted to the hospital." Then the call ended. Returning to the living room with a smile, April noticed, but said nothing, returning a smile herself, interpreting it as good news. Later, April took the children upstairs, casting a questioning glance at me, assuring her I'd be there when she returned. She smiled broadly and went about putting the children to bed. Settling into the living room, I waited in anticipation. The moment of reckoning had arrived as April returned with a coffee pot and cups. She suggested we talk further. Noting my apparent resignation, she expressed relief, professing her love and fear of losing me over such trivial matters in comparison to our relationships. Depth. I observed her as she spoke, her beauty still captivating me. After all, she was the woman I'd cherished for so long, envisioning a future of growing old together. But now those plans, those dreams lay shattered. "Let the end commence now, April. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully," I began. "I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings, a junior associate at Lynn Cohn Rice & Holmes. I know all about him, including your 2 meetings with him this week." April appeared surprised, poised to respond, but I motioned for her to remain silent. "That is the issue. You threatened me with divorce. When I expressed my anger, you threatened to strip away everything I have. I remember your exact words etched into my mind. You said, 'I'll take everything you have.' You said more. But those were the words that lingered. Words dripping with contempt that shattered our marriage. Those were the words that pushed me into a corner where I felt I had no choice but to watch you engage in closeness with another man. I told you the following night that cornered rats fight back. Now I could see the initial of fear and discomfort on her face. She wasn't certain what lay ahead, but she was savvy enough to realize it wouldn't be to her liking. Her shoulders tensed, and she instinctively withdrew her head in defense. "I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him, that you were his mistress," I continued. "I don't regret that this will end in a manner unfavorable to you. However, Mr. Cummings has been explicitly informed that his involvement with you is over. He'll never see you again or engage in any further closeness with you. Never. He was also cautioned against any contact with my sons, to which he agreed." Watching her face register shock and disbelief, I proceeded. "I'll initiate divorce proceedings, citing infidelity with no spousal support for you. Child support will be provided for my sons, ensuring they lack nothing as long as you fulfill your duties. I'll ensure you have the means, but you'll need to work for your own desires. I'll handle the paperwork and you'll be served." April rose, anger evident on her face. "You're delusional. If you think I'll agree to this, and I'll take everything you have, just as I promised." She retorted, still defiant. Despite her fear, she intended to bluff until the very end as she had strategized. "Why don't you call your Mr. Cummings right now? Let's see his response." "Wait, I believe you might need to dial the hospital. That call I received earlier informed me. He's in the emergency room at Memorial. I presume the news has reached you by now. Use my phone. I already have his number." April gazed at me in shock. "What have you done? What happened to Carl? My God. Chris, what did you do? Why? April, are you seriously asking me? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think to injure your lover? You made it abundantly clear that I should steer clear of this situation. It's none of my concern." My demeanor surely frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was typically calm and passive, never causing injury to anyone. I wouldn't even discipline the children physically, leaving that to her. Now she viewed me differently. My expression was cold and stern, my eyes devoid of emotion. April entered the next room, and I overheard her speaking on the phone. She returned with tears in her eyes, collapsing into a chair and staring into the distance. I remained composed, picking up the newspaper. I knew what she had heard on the phone. Her lover was ending things with her, faced with the choice of that or enduring a smacking each time he encountered her. That was the ultimatum delivered to him by 3 imposing men who intercepted him as he left work earlier. They made it clear why they targeted him and what repercussions awaited if he dared to see or speak to April again. They ensured he fully comprehended the message. April dried her tears, took a deep breath, and addressed me. "Well, it seems you've gotten your way. Carlin. For me, he never wants to see me again. He mentioned that all my belongings will be returned to me, and he has no desire to communicate with me. In that case, you have nothing to fret over. I have legal representation, so they will handle everything swiftly," I responded, setting the newspaper aside and rising to depart. "I'll speak with the boys this weekend and explain why we're divorcing. Perhaps they're mature enough to grasp the situation. If not, they'll eventually understand as they grow older." As I made my exit, I glanced back to see April sobbing. "If I recall your words correctly, April, you once claimed this affair would be short-lived and we could return to normalcy." I chuckled bitterly. "You're still young and attractive, April. Maybe you'll find someone willing to indulge your fantasies, someone open to an unconventional marriage, allowing you to pursue multiple partners. That wasn't me. But that's just my perspective. Best of luck. Children may not comprehend this, but adults must face the consequences of their actions, and those consequences can be harsh.